Need to move their side chicks. Hi. Hey guys, we're just getting started. We're just waiting for Darrel. He's gonna join us and we're gonna add him onto the screen. Thank you guys for joining. Jyoti, Vicky. It'll be great to kind of have this conversation. Darrel should be here soon and we should be able to get started. I'm just gonna grab some water really quickly and we will be right back. Hey everyone, we are just waiting for Darrel to join us. Once Darrel joins us, we're going to be talking a little bit about Chutney Soca music and some of the background of it. I think we have Darrel in now. We'll just wait for him to connect. Hi!
Are we good?
Yes, we are good. Perfect.
Right.
So we have a couple of viewers on already. So thank you everybody who's there.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you. Everybody, if you can hear Darrel, just send us a thumbs up.
Right. And I want to see if you all hear any music too. Hold on a sec. Give me a sec.
And I know we're a little bit early too. We're glad you guys are all here early. I guess the saying that all Caribbean people are late doesn't say to this group because we're 5 minutes early. So
I know, trying to fix this hair because I have no barber for like who knows till when. So I'm living the indentured legacy. All right, let me see if
I can hear that. I think everybody, you guys can hear that music.
I can make it louder, but I don't know if it will be That's still clear?
Yeah, I can hear that. Hey everyone, thank you guys all for joining. Perfect. We have some people saying they can hear the music and now we ain't got nowhere else to be. That's true, that's true.
All right.
Okay, so we'll wait like 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. I know we told everybody 4 o'clock, so we'll wait till 4 o'clock and then we'll get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll wait a little bit and then we'll get started. We'll get Darrel some time to pull up all his music. He's gonna be playing some nice Chutney music for us.
I have everything kind of organized, but I need to kind of have everything in order. So
great. Again, we are so happy that you guys are here with us. We kind of pulled this together very last minute. We were just talking.
You said just message was like, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like,
yeah, you know, like one of the things that we realized is that, you know, we were always talking about these things, and I'll get into this when everybody joins, like constantly learning about, like just the other day, me and Karmika, who's speaking next Tuesday, we're just talking about dance and the history of dance and how Tassa music has an actual art form, and you know, knowing that that wasn't something that I knew before, being able to learn about those things. So, hi from Long Island. Thanks for coming, for tuning in all the way from Long Island. Do we have anybody else from outside of Toronto here today? If you are from outside of Toronto, just tell us where you're from, and we will get started soon. Yeah, so these conversations, we've been having these conversations for a while, and we were like, you know what, like every time I talk to Darrel, I'll tell you guys I learned something about Chutney music. So I'm like, people need to know this. Like, and I am, everybody will know probably by the end of this. Every time I listen to a Chutney song now, I always message Darrel. I'm like, what does this mean? Like the other day I was listening to that song Mario, and I was like, why is she talking about Mario? I know there's no Mario in it. Like, why is name Mario?
still have me thinking about that. You still
So we're always trying to learn about these different things. Okay, we got a lot of people from New York. Wow, New York. We're glad that we have you from Ozone Park.
Hope you guys are keeping safe.
Yes, of course. Boston. Great to see you guys, to kind of have you guys here. Yes, Queens does represent. I hope everybody is keeping safe in Queens. I know it's hitting hard there. Hey, Renata activated her Instagram to join us. Wow, she took it off. She took off her Instagram and then joined us again. So All right. So I think it's 4 o'clock, so we can just get started with introductions, and then as we get into the conversation, as people join, they can join. So my name is Talisha Ramsroop. I'm from Toronto. I'm one of the co-founders of this organization called Lotus Toronto, which is an organization of just kind of created to kind of create space for Indo-Caribbean people within the Toronto context. And it was started by me and 3 other amazing women, Indo-Caribbean women, who were just interested in creating space to document, stories of Indo-Caribbean experience, to kind of share those stories, but also to have very meaningful conversation with some of our elders. It's a very intergenerational space, to learn about different aspects of Indo-Caribbean life. And so we kind of started that organization, I think about 2 years ago now. And so this conversation that we're having today, specifically around Chutney Soca music, we really wanted to have it because I know a lot of us listen to Chutney music. Chutney music is a part of us. When it comes on, our hands go out, we start to choke, everything starts to go on. And Darrel and me are infamous for this. Whenever we're somewhere and there's Chutney music, you could catch us on the dance floor, bottle on the floor, whatever we need to do. Right? Of course, but there's so much more to Chutney music that I think gets lost. And I know people are always having this conversation growing up that, Chutney music has no substance, but there's so much more to that story that we don't talk about a lot. So we kind of wanted to have this conversation and share this with everybody else. And I'm sure you guys have some knowledge about this. So throughout this conversation, we're going to do it very informally. So feel free to kind of drop your questions in there if you have them. I'll facilitate those questions. If you know something about a song, or there's a song that you're really interested in, feel free to talk about it. But we're here to really help us understand Chutney music and its influence on Indo-Caribbean people and its legacy throughout history. It's been with us throughout history. Darrel's going to talk a little bit about that. But let me introduce the incredible Dr. Chatak Matak, also known as DJ Marco, also known as Darrel, the PhD doctor. So Darrel is doing his PhD. I'll let you introduce yourself in details. He's doing his PhD right now. There's a lot of incredible work on the side. I first met Darrel, funny story, and this is a very important story because I lived up at Jane and Shepherd, and Darrel was presenting at a conference at UFT. I had no clue who this man was, by the way. All I saw was somebody was presenting on Chutney music, and I was like, who is presenting on Chutney music in a space at University of Toronto? Like, what is going on? And so I woke up, I took the subway, which used to take 2 hours at that point, down to downtown at 9 a.m. to catch this man. And when I heard Darrel talk about Chutney music, I felt so represented. To have a space like the University of Toronto and to be able to have a conversation about my music and music that's often kind of frowned upon, being talked about into that space, it was so powerful for me. And we've kind of stayed connected since then. We line a lot, we go out, we do all kinds of things, and it's always a learning experience with Darrel. So Darrel, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then you can tell us a little bit about how you got into this work, and then we'll go into the conversation.
Fantastic. Talisha, I first want to thank you and thank the Lotus family. Talisha's like chosen family to me. Talisha's like my little sister. So I'm happy for her to come up with this initiative. I'm happy to help out. I'm just happy to have the platform to have this kind of talk. So how I got into this work. So actually I did my undergrad at U of T in Caribbean Studies. So I majored in Caribbean Studies. And just being in the program, it was interesting because I had always grown up with a sense of my Caribbeanness, a sense of my Indo-Caribbeanness. We didn't necessarily call it that at home, and maybe that's something we could take up maybe in the question, this idea of Indo-Caribbean, of Indianness, Indian in the Caribbean. We have all these different things. Even some of us identify as West Indian. What does that mean? East Indian is still used. I hate that term because of, things about colonialism that I'll talk about. But yeah, I grew up with a sense of my heritage, but I was always searching for my identity. And I remember all throughout high school, like I went to a high school that had a lot of Caribbean students, a lot of Jamaicans out in East Scarborough. If anybody who's from East Scarborough, out at West Hill, there was a whole Caribbean contingent. So dances were always had soca, always had dancehall, but we never really used to hear about chutney. But me and my small group with my Guyanese and Trinis, we used to play with the chutney ending. So I had like my best friend always says, I kept her grounded when she came from Guyana to Toronto. because she was very much about trying to discard those things about her to kind of fit in with Canadian society, and I kind of helped her keep grounded. So all that stuff, by the time I went to university, was so interested in, finding out more about my heritage, more about my identity. So I decided to do this major in Caribbean studies. Fun fact is that I also minored in South Asian studies because I was at this point where I understood my Caribbeanness, but I also wanted to understand my Indianness within that Caribbeanness. And I almost found like it wasn't real. It wasn't legitimate. It wasn't authentic. And these terms are really important. I'm going to talk about these things again in the talk today. But I was always searching for my identity. And only to find out that I go to these South Asian studies classes and I'm one from the Caribbean. Nobody knows about me. I'm not treated the same way. I don't speak Hindi or Urdu, so there's a language barrier there. The traditions are different, and they don't also have an understanding of our historical context. So there's very much a disconnect there. By the time I finished undergrad and decided I want to do my postgrad work, I wanted to continue it in this. It was because in the Caribbeanness, there's still a lack of like representation in the academic literature. There's still a lack of representation in like academic courses. I know that there are components at UT, Ryerson, and UARC, at least in Toronto, that deal a bit with Indianness, that deal with indentureship. But some of the things that I deal with, the popular culture, we still aren't talking about those things and having a lot of dialogue about those things. And the academic literature is also still lacking in those things. So here I am. This is where I fit in. This is where my work is, Indo-Caribbean popular culture, using Chutney Soca as a platform to understand Indo-Caribbean identity. And what I'm interested in is more so the evolution of the genre. Historical context is so important, and you'll see throughout this talk, history and the past and memory and nostalgia is so important to the Indian community for particular reasons. But at the same time, we're always trying to modernize, we're always trying to progress, we're always trying to be relevant and be in the times. And I think music is also responding to that call. How do we stay relevant as Indo-Caribbean people? And the dilemma might be, how do we honor our ancestry, honor our traditions, honor that indentured link that we come from, but at the same time, we've grown up in new spaces. The Caribbean is a new space. We've had to mix in that space. So what does that mixing mean? And I really see Chutney Soca as, a kind of emblem of that cultural mixing. And you see that taking place throughout the music. So that's where I am with my work. I'm hoping to get my dissertation and everything done in defense by the end of the year, hopefully earlier than that. It's been a long journey. I've had problems. And again, that's because we don't have academic specialists in this area. There are not a lot of academic specialists and academic specialists who are of Indo-Caribbean descent, who specialize, in Indo-Caribbean popular culture. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think when you were talking, I saw a lot of hearts. I think people were really relating with the idea that you were talking about, this idea of not trying to find your identity in a place where, South Asians weren't saying that you were South Asians and Caribbeans were also not saying that you weren't Caribbean. And I think that's something that a lot of people experience. But one of the things that you said that also resonated to me was the idea of chutney music and having to let go of chutney music to assimilate to Canadian society, because I feel like soca music is seen as like this very exotic, and it gets taken up by a lot of people in Canada, like Lily Singh and all of these people, because it's cool. Soca music is cool. But chutney music, on the other hand, is kind of seen as, oh, you fresh off the boat, you still listen to chutney music, right? So it doesn't have the same type of exotification that soca music has kind of taken on in the Canadian context. So it's great to hear you say that. And I know a lot of people were saying that, they related with that, and it was so true. So just wanted to flag those two things, but I'll let you get into talking a little bit about, using that platform of soca chutney music to understand Caribbean identity and that history of it. So I'll just give it over to you, and then I'll moderate the questions. So if people have questions, feel free to throw them in. I'll put them down, and then I'll ask them to Darrel when he takes a breath. Yeah.
No problem. So I just want to tell everybody, like, this is an informal chat. This is not like a lecture. You're going to get information. You're going to get, because, I always have the critical eye when I'm doing my work. I'm always asking questions. I'm always making arguments, always making observations. And I'm going to give you some of the arguments that I through work. But I want to tell everybody it's great that you all resonate with some of the things I've said about growing up and trying to find identity. But the identity is real, it's legitimate, it's not backward. It's like I don't want you to leave or be feeling that you don't matter and it doesn't count and it's not real. It's very real. And I think I realized that like it took the PhD for me to realize that the identity was always there, but there are things that prevented me from seeing that reality. And I think the idea of mixture is a big thing. And I think that's why I titled the talk, Mixing Some Chutney. Because at the end of the day, my work is really thinking about mixings and crossings and remixings and what does that thing mean. And I think as much as we talk about chutney and chutney soca, we also have to talk about soca and this relation to the Afro-Caribbean popular culture, to Afro-Caribbean communities. Like there is no chutney soca without that soca element, and that element is from the Afro-Caribbean communities who were there in the Caribbean before indentureship, right? So I know that there are some Indian communities because of the way that Indianness has been shaped, because of the way that the narrative has been shaped, because of politics, because of racial tensions, that some of us are very resistant to thinking about mixing. And I want to say that mixing doesn't only have to be that interracial biological mixing. It's a cultural thing as well. And we see that not only in music, we see it in food. There are foods that we didn't have when we came to the Caribbean and we learned about them. And then there are foods that came from South Asia, readapted in the Caribbean. And our peers, our Afro-Caribbean peers, all the other groups that came to the Caribbean, they learned about those things from us. I know so many people who are not of Indian descent and could make a boss roti. So, I mean, we are talking about real things here, and we're talking about mixings and what does it mean to mix. Now, at the same time, there are tensions about those mixings, and I think those tensions come out in the music in particular ways. So, I think I just want to start with a history, but I'm kind of taking a chronological approach, but at the same time, I also want to preface this talk by saying it's not linear. None of this thing about Indian culture is linear. It doesn't come in a straight line from India to the Caribbean. It's fragmented, it gets mixed, it gets remixed. So it's complicated, it's confusing, it's contradictory at times. We see that in the music. Things go one way and then come back another way, and then something else happens. And I think that's just part of popular culture and popular culture being dynamic, people trying to create meaning and find meaning, right? So, for all those who don't know, Indians come to the Caribbean because of indentureship, and indentureship follows African enslavement and the abolition of slavery. And what we have to understand in terms of the historical context of the sugar plantation is that there were some islands, even after the abolition of slavery, that still had land that was arable for growing cane. So you had plantation owners who were like, okay, well, we don't have a labor source now. We still want this to continue because it's economics and it's about economics. It's about capitalism. It's about sugar becoming a commodity. So what do we do? How do we find another source of labor? And that's how we get the other groups that come into the Caribbean. Actually, the Portuguese from Madeira and the Chinese are the ones that they tried first for indentureship, and they're not able to do that type of work. And you see them go into business. So I think in Trinidad and in Guyana, you would know a lot of people who are of Portuguese descent and of Chinese descent who own shops, who get into businesses. Like the Chinese shop is a thing in Trinidad. I don't know if it's a thing. Is it a thing in Guyana, Talisha?
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Okay.
big thing in Guyana. Yes.
So then the Indians come in, and they're a group who is able to do this hardback laboring work that is required of sugarcane plantation life. They occupy like the same barracks that the African slaves occupied. And I don't want to get into this discussion of, was indentureship better than slavery? Was it worse? Both systems were traumatic. Both systems were violent. Yes, under indentureship, there was a contract, there was a pay, and those things did not exist with African enslavement. But the conditions, I wouldn't say, were any less or any greater. I think we're talking about a deep trauma, we're talking about deep violence, we're talking about deep suffering. And how do you find identity and how do you create identity and meaning because or out of that suffering? So the majority of the indentured laborers who go to the Caribbean come from an area that's eastern Uttar Pradesh and western Bihar. Those are in the northern part of India. So if anybody wanted to pull up a map, if you look for the states of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, you look at eastern Uttar Pradesh and western Bihar, that is the Bhojpuri speaking region of India. Bhojpuri is a language on its own. A lot of people call it a dialect. It's related to Hindi, but it's like a nation language on its own. It's a regional language. It's the same way how I hate when people say, oh, like when people speak Guyanese Creole or Trinidadian Creole or Jamaican Patois, oh, that's a dialect. That's not real language. No, that's language. That's a nation language. And I think we need to get away from these colonial constructs, people. We need to decolonize, right? And a lot of the work that I do too is also about trying to rewrite these histories, right? We are the ones who need to rewrite these histories, right? So others come from different parts of India. There's a minority that comes from South India who are traced to, the Tamil diaspora. But they don't only go to the Caribbean. They go to Mauritius. They go to Fiji. Some of them go to South Africa. Some of them go to South America. So we're talking about Guyana and Suriname. Other than Trinidad, they go up the islands, Jamaica and the smaller islands. They get portions of Indians. Definitely, though, of the numbers, Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname, in terms of that Caribbean South American connection, they have the largest population. So Indians go there. They're actually not supposed to stay there. So they're transient, right? And under the terms of the contract, they're only supposed to work for 5 years and return with money and go back to India. There are tons of things that we can, assume, and tons of things that we can ask about that. Who was counting those years? Is it the plantation owner? We're talking about people who are not educated. We are talking about people who are told to sign a contract when they don't have any kind of education. We're talking about people who have been fooled into this idea, deceived into the idea of riches through indentureship. Now, at the same time, there is an agency, and that agency did not exist with the Afro-Caribbean community. Afro-Caribbean people as slaves, they were kidnapped, they were brutalized. So I want to make that distinction. There was a sense of agency with Indian populations, but I also think within that agency, there was a lot of deception. So they didn't actually know where they were going and what they were getting into. But they bring with them their folk culture, and then that folk culture gets readopted. And once they begin to resettle in the Caribbean, because then they're offered land in the Caribbean, and that's a source of contention that I would say starts the kind of the beginnings of the racial divisions, the racial antagonisms, the racial divisions between the two largest groups who in both Trinidad and Guyana are the Indian group and the African group. Interestingly, Indians are allowed to retain their culture to a certain extent. So the music also comes over. The music culture from that Bhojpuri speaking region comes over. And it's a very rich region in terms of those traditions. And there are a lot of traditions tied to the Hindu wedding and the way that Hindu weddings and the way that childbirths are celebrated in that Bhojpuri speaking region. So chutney comes out of a Hindu context, right? It comes out of the Hindu wedding space. It comes out of that childbirth space. So the Hindu wedding space, what we call the mati core, some of you all know, what they call in Guyana the dig dati, the Friday night before the Hindu wedding when the women go to dig dirt and there's tassa playing, and it's a very private space, it's a feminist space. It's a space where they could enact some kind of female empowerment that they didn't have in the house or they didn't have in public life in general. It was their way also to enact sexual agency. So the types of dances and the types of songs and lyrics that you hear are very sexualized. They're very empowering. They're very, well, what my mother and my nanny is called the vulgar and the rude and, but for a reason, right? And at the same time, I think the Matikor also becomes a space for where the Hindu bride, like it's a Hindu bridal shower. She learns about what her role is as the Hindu wife. She gets her sex education through the dances, through the songs, right? So Matikor is one space. And what I want to say is that chutney and what we call chutney draws from multiple musical contexts. So Matikor and that Hindu wedding space is one. You have the Barahi or the Chatti, which is the Hindu childbirth space. So when a child is born in the Hindu tradition, 6 days and or 12 days after the child is born, they have a ceremony. They perform certain Hindu rituals, but it's also like a big party. So there's singing and dancing to celebrate the birth of a new child. Why am I sticking here?
Your voice is coming through, but it just it just kind of going around. Oh, let me see. Something's going on there, Darrel. I think you're freezing up a little bit. Say something. Let me hear. Oh no, your sound is gone. Something's going on with your sound. Let's see if we can get that resolved. But I'm loving the comments. Yes, the song Anna Anna, Don't Squeeze Me Banana. Still can't hear you, Darrel. No, we can't hear you. Your audio is gone. I don't know. You want to try exiting and joining again? I'm gonna exit and then join. I'll thing you again. Yeah, I'll push you out and then join again. Okay, we're gonna try to get Darrel back. You out and then add you in. But to some of those comments, yes. The Mati Core, I remember my nanny, or my family, when it comes to Mati Core, the dances that they do on Mati Core night, I've never seen them do those kind of dance before. So, okay, let's get Darrel back in. Perfect. Okay, I think we should be getting some of those songs. Somebody wants some more lyrics. Well, Anna, Anna, show me your bananas. Anybody else got any examples of those lyrics? Feel free to share them in the chat there while I try to get Darrel back in. Let's go. Always some kind of technical difficulties, with these kinds of things. This is our first time too, so give us a second. Let's figure this out. One thing that Darrel said that I know really resonated with me was really kind of acknowledging our languages, whether it's Trini or Guyanese, acknowledging that type of language as real language. We don't acknowledge being able to speak Guyanese as a real language, but it really is. If you speak Guyanese, most people won't understand you otherwise, right? So what I'm going to do, my action item for today is that I am going to make sure that I put that I speak 2 languages on my resume. So be ready for that, okay? Especially in the context of the work that I do. I think it's definitely a skill that I should be putting on my resume, that I could speak broken down Guyanese and understand it. There we go. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're back.
Sorry, Jared. So you were talking about, yeah, you can just take over.
Bear with me. Right. Okay. So yeah, so I was saying that, were there any questions, Alicia?
No, everybody was just kind of talking about the lyrics and laughing about the job. Magic coordinators for ladies to get away. Yes, that's the I was talking about how for my Magic night, all the ladies took the belna and they were holding it right there.
Yeah. So the belna becomes a phallic symbol. The baigan is a phallic symbol. Baigan and 2 alu tie wrong waist to symbolize that whole sexual imagery, and the dance is like the actual thrust of like sexual intercourse. So it was like sex education through song and dance for the Dullahin, which was the young Hindu bride. So Matikor is one space, the Barahi is another space, and I was saying the Barahi is 12 days, Bara is 12 in Hindi. So 12 days after the child is born, there are songs that the women sing. So what's interesting here is that Chutney predominantly emerges out of a female singing tradition, singing and song and dance tradition, the Matikor and the Barahi. But at the same time, there is also the men's classical singing tradition, right? In the Caribbean, men used to sit down and sing tumris and ghazals. There's a whole body of what we in Indo Caribbean classical singing. I think they call it tan singing in Guyana. Baitak Ghana is another word for it, and it's associated with both the classical singing tradition and the kind of chutney tradition that comes out of Suriname. Baitak, baita means to sit in Hindi, and Ghana is song. So a song you would sing sitting down, right? And I know some of you might know about like the spread pal. Remember there was a chutney group, the spread pal crew. This idea that you would spread pal and that you would sit on the pal and also play and all that kind of stuff. We stick again.
That's okay. We can hear you, you know. It sticks for a little bit and then it freezes and then it shows your video. You wait, we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you anymore. No, we can't hear you anymore. Okay, look, I'm gonna do the same thing we did last time, okay? So join. I'm gonna kick you out and then you can join again, okay? Sorry guys. We are going to just try this thing again. Okay, Darrel, see if you could. Oh, it's a little. Darrel, say something. Let me hear because you're moving now. And thank you for everybody who just joined. I know there's a bunch of people just joined. People are talking about the different singing styles. I didn't know about these singing styles, so this is a learning experience for me. Everybody that just joined from New York, from some of Darrel's family, I think, some cousins, those kinds of things. Welcome. We were just talking about the history of chutney music and coming from both female spaces such as the Matikor, but then also from some of the more masculine spaces. And Darrel talked about some of the names for those. Sitting and singing, some aspects of those kinds of things. So for those who just joined us, that's kind of where we are right now. We talked a little about indentureship. So that's good. Let's see. I know somebody also mentioned while we were talking, they talked about divide and conquer. And yes, that was actually a method used during the time of colonialism to kind of separate the Indos and the Afros from kind of coming together and joining forces. So kind of really turning us against.
And contribute in terms of the Guyanese radio context, in terms of Indian music there. I would be grateful for that. In Trinidad, you had like a national radio station and they had like a program that was just devoted to like Indian music. So you would hear a lot of film songs on that station. And we're talking like pre-independence, so like the 40s and the 50s. And I think that's why a lot of the songs from that era have a lot of meaning for Indo Caribbean communities, because that was the type of music they grew up with. That was the type of music they grew up hearing. Right. So moving on now, I think we all know about Sundar Popo. And Sundar is like a chutney legend. He's like the godfather of chutney, if you want to call him that. And he was doing interesting things. Sundar Popo grew up with a mother and an aunt who used to go and sing in the matikurs and go sing in the barais. So they would bring him as a little boy to hear these things. So he would see these things he would hear the music. So it was something that was very much ingrained in him. And then he was the one who began to record some of these songs. So these songs are not his original songs. And I think we need to contest the idea or think through the idea of originality. What does originality mean? In terms of my work, I don't believe in originality. I don't think anything is original. Everything comes from somewhere else. And as much as we talk about like chutney origins and our Indian origins, a lot of us get fixated on this idea of like the source and what is the source of this thing, and is this because of originality? How do we think through, is it real enough, is it authentic enough? There's this idea of purity, and I try to get away from that in my work. I'm so much more interested in how does this thing evolve, how does this thing adapt, how does this thing remix. And I think the legacies that come out of those indentured origins are what are really important to me. And that's what I see Sundar Popo doing, taking up a tradition and now actually being able to record that tradition. So now we have like this documented recorded sound archive. And you also have to realize at the same time you have Calypso in Trinidad going on. So there's a Calypso industry, there's a recording industry. And then Sundar Popo is one of like the first Indian artists to join that recording industry. Interestingly, he does both things, and he does like the same folk songs that you would have heard, and I'll play two for you just now. As the brass from Calypso, the tempo from Calypso, and it's almost what you might want to call like Indian Calypso.
My fire alarm is going on. Just ignore it. Just ignore it. I don't know what's going on.
So
Just some-
a lot of his and then some of would have
Darrel, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat that piece? I think maybe my sound was cutting in. So just repeat what you just said.
Yeah, no, all I was saying is that so Sundar Popo's folk song in terms of like the linguistics and the language, he sings in Bhojpuri and some of those like more folk Bhojpuri things. Yeah, and you'll hear the sound of is very like chutney, what we would consider chutney. And then his that he would sing in like Trinidadian English Creole is more along the lines of calypso. It takes on like the tempo of calypso, the melodies of calypso, the instruments of calypso, and you'll hear the difference, right? So I'm gonna play two of them now. Kaise Bani, you all know that one, and then Don't Fall in Love. So that's the two I'm gonna play for you now. Let me know if you can hear, right? I have a whole system set up back here. So
Yes. Okay, I think Kaise Bunny brought down the system, you know. Wait, say something. I don't know if I can hear you or not. Oh God. I think Kaise Bunny brought down. Dude, we can't hear nothing, man. Look, he whining to himself too. Can you guys hear what Darrel's playing? Is it just me that is tuning out? Can you guys hear him? Cause he whining up there like he playing some bad song. Okay, let me get Darrel back. The sound is gone. Hopefully this will be the last time we have to do this, okay? Everybody say a little prayer that this is the last time we have to do this. It's Hanuman Jayanti today, so if you're Hindu, say a little extra prayer. Let's get him back. Darrel, there's no sound. We're gonna have to do the thing again. Okay, we're gonna try to get him back. We'll get him back in here right now. Like I said, guys, it's our first time doing this. Somebody here said they had some hookups on Bell 5, so I don't know what you guys gotta do to get Darrel some internet right now, but if you guys can do something to get him some extra internet, that would be greatly appreciated. Yes, round. We would appreciate all of the different prayers, okay? Let's go. There we go. That's the first time it worked so fast. Let's see if it worked. Can you guys hear me? Is my voice is my voice coming? Okay, there we go. Back. All right. So we heard Kaise Bani. We got to Kaise Bani. And then we saw you dancing up a little bit, but then after that.
okay, yes, folks, I know you can't hear, man. I know you can't hear the audio. Okay, so I'll play in Kaise Bani. You heard the dholak, which is the hand drum, the danta, which is a metal rod that they play. It has a tinkling sound. You heard the I don't know if the harmonium was in there, but Indian sounds, Indian folk sounds, right? And it was sung in Bhojpuri. Whereas in Don't Fall in Love, you're gonna hear more about calypso styling, a calypso tempo, no Bhojpuri lyrics, right? I'm gonna talk about the verse that he sings after I play. All right, so we try this again. Y'all hear it now?
Yeah, we hear it. Let me not sing before this internet breaks more. Let me not sing. Yes, you can also dance, you can also wine. A chunk.
You know.
To do.
I think we're gone again.
The way he sings. Okay. Wait, Darrel, we see you. We see you if you can. Can you hear us? We appreciate you guys all staying, even though we're having some technical issues there. We're gonna do the thing one more time because you're gone again. So I'm sticking with us through these technical difficulties. Hopefully, we'll start our GoFundMe after this to get Darrel some proper internet because he looked like he has Burmese internet going on over there. I don't know if there's a part in Trinidad that's bush like Burmese. And this thing, the fire alarm is, oh God, this is a whole disaster. Okay, so let me invite Darrel. My fire alarm never comes off. Paisley Bunny plays and then suddenly the fire alarm is going on. I can't with today. It just shows. Okay, so let's get Darrel back into this now. Darrel, if you're listening, if you can send, perfect. Got the request. All right. And we know you guys have been listening to us for about 40 minutes now. We appreciate it.
Right.
There we go. All right. So you heard.
Thanks for bearing. It's like every time I tune drop, the connection does go, girl. All right. So I think you heard Don't Fall in Love.
Yeah, we heard it.
All right. So I think you can hear the difference. And I think that also speaks to this idea of the idea of mixing I'm talking about. What does it mean to be Indo Caribbean? What does it mean to be Indian in a Caribbean space? What does it mean to take on elements of other musics that exist in the same space, right? And I think you see that with Sundar Popa, like Don't Fall in Love sounds very much like Calypso. At the same time, his theme is about like heartbreak and tabanka, and that becomes a theme that we hear a lot about in like Indian music. And that's also tied to like ideas of love and heartbreak that come out of like Hindi films. So there's a whole other thread there that's tied to like Indianness, right? Just that last verse, he sings, "My heart still aches in sadness, my secret tears still flow, and what it means to lose you, no one will ever know. For when the eyes of love broken, and love would have to part, it leaves a pain that never heals and many a broken heart." Lyrics, you're falling from a plane, girl, you're falling from above. Listen to me, darling, and don't fall in love.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So Sundar Popo is doing this thing. And this is how Indian music now begins to come into the popular space in terms of Trinidad, which is very much dominated at the time by Calypso and Afro-Caribbean traditions. In the late 70s, early to late 70s, you have Shorty, and you all might know him as Rash Shorty. You all know Nyla Blackman? Well, is Nyla Blackman grandfather, right? Garfield Blackman was his name. He went initially when he used to sing Calypso as Lord Shorty, and there's a joke in there because he was so tall, he won the nickname of Shorty. So that was his Calypso name. When he had a kind of epiphany, a religious epiphany, and then he moved into a rural, remote area of Trinidad called Piparo, he took on tenets of like Rastafarianism and other religious traditions, and he termed himself Rash Shorty I. But before he was Rash Shorty I, he was also doing particular things in the music. And what I want to say here is that there's not just one person who has created this tradition. There are different artists doing different things at different times. So there's all this mixing and musical experimentation. And I think it's happening in both the Indian tradition and the African tradition. So we're seeing it happening in both like Chutney and also happening in Soca and Calypso music. So Shorty proposes this thing he calls Sokah, Sokah. And he wants to create what he calls a Trinidad and Tobagonian sound, right? He wants to create some kind of unified sound that would represent both groups, a kind of sound of... So...
Let's go in the bathroom. Let's go in the bathroom for a second. Continue.
And he's in an area of Trinidad. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And what he does is combine and some of the kind of melodic expressions with calypso, and he calls that soca. And he says he wants it to be the soul of calypso, right? The heart of the nation, the heart of these two groups coming together, fine, right? The KAH is from Hindi, and that's the English transliteration of the first syllable of the Hindi alphabet, ka, right? So ka is supposed to symbolize that English alphabet. So is from calypso. So I want a lot of people have heard his music. He had an album in the 70s called album, and it was this combination of those Indian folk songs with that calypso tradition.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that Sokah was actually like the merging of the Indian language. KOH. I said I didn't know that. Like that's new to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happened, how it got into soca, I'll talk about that after I play the two songs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I love to get
You can hear the dolak in this.
Yes, yeah, I can hear the dola. Send some hearts if you know this song. What?
Right. So, Kelo means to play in Hindi. It's talking about the Indian music, but he also wants to play for the whole thing with Bacchanal and Carnival. So it's trying to bring that Indian sound into that Carnival space. And then the second song is called Call of Carnival. And it's very much about the themes and the lyrics and the elements of the Carnival space. But you definitely hear a strong Indian presence in terms of that folk thing. So that was what Shorty was trying to do. Combine the two musical traditions and create a kind of unified song. As Dr. Gisio said on the chat there, a Dogla song. And we have a question about, is Dogla a slur? Yes, it is used as a slur, but I think in academics we've also tried to reclaim the term in the same way that we've tried to reclaim the term kuli, a new meaning out of that. So this idea of Dogla-ness, this mixing, I mean, Dogla is really about the kind of biological mixing between Indian and African groups. But there's also this idea in terms of the culture. What does it mean to have a type of Dogla culture, right? How can we think about Chutney and maybe Indo Caribbean tradition and even, Soca as a type of Doglarized culture, right? This idea of mixing. So there are different terms that we use to think about mixing. Creolization is another one that's been used. It takes meanings in different spaces. So what I just wanted you to get was a idea of the sound of Shorty, what he was trying to do, and not a lot of us have heard that sound. Thank you, Dr. Gisiawan, for pointing us to some academic work on people who have been looking and thinking through the idea of Dogla, right? And yeah, there's a whole rebirth reclamation going on in terms of the terms, right? After Shorty does his thing, it's interesting that both groups don't like what he's doing. So the African communities are saying, well, you're spoiling calypso music because now you bring this Indian sound into this thing. Even though we still hear the brass, we still hear the lyrics and the themes and the melodies that are part of that calypso tradition. Now you're spoiling the calypso. And then the Indian communities are saying that he's desecrating their music. This is this idea of that Indian music taking on a type of purity, taking on a type of sacredness, taking on a type of significance that is very important specifically to the Indian communities. When we mix this thing, we kind of diluting this thing. So this idea of mixture gets very contentious. You know, we have these narratives of racial purity that I don't endorse. I think we need to get away from these ideas of like purity and authenticity and think about how is the music evolving? How is the mixing allowing us to take the music in different spaces, take the music to a different place? What are the potentials and the possibilities of the music when we mix, right? And a lot of my work is kind of exploring those questions. So Shorty does this thing, and then SOCA, what we know as Sokah, takes off. And what happens is that he transfers some of the rhythms that you hear from the Indian instruments and puts them on like the Western instruments you would hear in calypso and soca music. So the drums and the brass and the bass take on things that would come from those Bhojpuri folk traditions, right? And then soca begins to absorb other sounds. It begins to absorb funk and disco and soul. And then you have people like Shadow and Tobago doing a whole Tobagonian folk thing. You have that whole Grenadian tradition that came to Trinidad that Super Blue and Iowa George do. So there's that whole kind of Grenadian roots thing that finds its way into soca. Maestro was doing a lot of the soul funk in his music. So I see a lot of work that talks about Shorty as the creator of soca music. I try to get away from that kind of narrative. I think he was doing a particular thing in terms of bringing the Indian sound to calypso music. And there were other artists who were experimenting around the same time, bringing different sounds into play. And all of them combined together, everybody draws from these things now, right? So somebody puts something into the pie or into the pot, and now you dip in the pot and layer. You get a piece of pumpkin now that wasn't there before because somebody threw the pumpkin inside, right? So there's this whole continual mixing that's going on in the tradition.
You get a cook up. You get cook up when you're done.
Yeah, cook up a little pilau, a little cook up going up inside there, right? So moving forward now from the 70s, moving into the 80s, soca begins to take hold as a kind of party music now. That is music that everybody wants when they go to fete. Now, we all know in the 80s, we know about Jupiter, we know about Ricky Jai, so I'm going to quickly play them for you, but they are important. And I know that, you know, if you look at the literature on Indo Caribbean popular music, we always talk about Jupiter, we always talk about Ricky Jai, because they are such seminal figures, right? Jupiter was doing a thing at a time when Indo Caribbean women couldn't do those things. She basically stepped out of the box, broke those boundaries, broke those barriers, and said, you know what? I want to do this thing, and I want to be on that stage. And interestingly enough, Jupiter never wanted to be a chutney singer. You know, if you look at all her interviews, she always says she wanted to sing on a calypso stage. She wanted to sing calypso. She grew up near Panyard in the south of Trinidad, so she was exposed to the calypso sound, the pan sounds, and she also wanted to bring that Indian style and the tassa drumming in particular to soul music. And that's how we get Roll Up the Tassa and Mr. Beast. The year after Roll Up the Tassa, she did a song called Indian Soca. And I think that song was really important in trying to create this narrative that we really need to talk about mixing. She was trying to do something where she wanted to mix the Indian in the soca thing. And then you had Ricky Jai, who sang Sumintra. And that whole thing was about this kind of discarding or moving away from the Hindi film music to like actually give me soca music, right? Holy Lata Mangeshkar, give me soca, right? That's what Ricky Jai sings in the chorus of that song, right? He's trying to track this girl, and he's trying to track this girl with Hindi film music, and she's like, listen, brother, I'm not about that. I want to hear my soca music. So we see this kind of shift now in terms of like identity. How are Indian groups beginning to identify? How are they finding themselves, within the national and popular spaces of the Caribbean? So I'm gonna play for you some Jupiter and Ricky Jai. I think I also have like Crazy Nanny Wine in there, and I think that's important because it's not only about Indo Caribbean artists doing this thing. You also have Calypsonians and Soca artists drawing on the Indian traditions as well and bringing these sounds into, right? So there are mutual flows taking place. Right. So let's get to this one here. And how we going in the chat there?
I think we're good in the chat. People seem to be enjoying. They're talking about the songs. They're talking about a Latin influence in Calypso.
Nice. Yes, for sure. Multiple influences, right? So the three songs I have here is also known as Indian Soca. It's also called Hotter Than a Chulha by Drupati. Then we have Nine by Crazy, and then Sumintra by Vijay.
I still feel about the wine at home. Listen, the stream's gonna cut off in 15 seconds, but we'll just start it right back up because they only allow an hour.
Okay.
So it's gonna cut off, we'll start it back up so everybody could just rejoin, okay?
Dance on. Dance now.
Okay, we're back. We're just gonna get right back into it with the Indian Soca song. Instagram Live does this weird thing where they only give you an hour and they cut it off. So we were trying to, do this within an hour. We'll probably finish in the next 10 minutes or so, but just so we can hear those three songs and hear some of Darrel's closing points, we're gonna bring it back. I don't know.
Guys, back to some good music. I think the song was Chutney Soca. That's what we're hearing right now. Darrel, you can continue playing.
Okay. No, because because I just have too much stuff. That's the problem. So,
No, that's okay.
right. No, so there's Jupiter. I'm just gonna maybe fast forward it, but I think what I want you to leave with here is just that there's all this mixing taking place, mixing in soca, and then the mixing happens in chutney, and it's about bridging the cultures. How is this bridging taking place? And then by the mid-90s, you have the start of the Chutney Soca Monarch competition in Trinidad, which becomes part of like the carnival calendar because we have tons of musical competitions for carnival in Trinidad. It coincides with the ascendance of the first prime minister of Indian descent. So in a sense, Indian culture became more visible in national spaces, and Chutney Soca actually became institutionalized in the carnival space through the Chutney Soca Monarch tradition. Since then, it's been about 25 years now since that competition began. And that's still a young time for like a genre of music to establish itself. And chutney has developed rapidly in such a short time. What has happened since then, we have a new generation of young artists, which you probably all know now, the Ravi Bs and the Nisha Bs and the Sally Sagrams and the Pretty V Bims and tons of like younger artists who are carrying on the tradition, but also taking the music in different directions. And I think this is perhaps like the conundrum and speaks to the bigger, deeper issues about Indo-Caribbean identity. How do we carry on the tradition, hold on to the tradition, honor the tradition, but also, keep it relevant? How can we do new things and create new meanings with the music? What we're having right now in the music, there's a resurgence of the older styles of chutney, and they're calling it now chutney. Like it was always there, but now it's being termed as traditional chutney. And we're hearing a lot of the older songs being redone by younger artists. How how much time I have, Talisha?
Let's give it another 10 minutes. I know people want to go start cooking up and stuff, so maybe 10 minutes.
All right. So maybe I'll just play one song and then talk about maybe like the future of Chutney, throw some things out there. But there's been this resurgence, the Chatak Matak invasion, if you all have heard of that. There's this Chatak Matak style of music now. So moving from when the songs went to like Radhika and Jeff Sting Nena, where the tempo slowed down, we had a lot of Bollywood film melodies. Now we get back into that Matikor and that kind of Barahi space. The themes return to, the Hindu wedding. Old songs are being revamped into new things. So the culture is cycling. And a parallel thing is also happening in Soca music. If you all remember, Soca was going very EDM. If you remember Bunjigal and Differentology that time, we hear a lot of the brass coming back in the Soca music. We hear a lot of live instrumentation coming back in Soca music. So there are parallel things happening in both genres. A song that became popular, I think it was last year, Sham Sundar by Prithvi Beam. Her grandmother, Premati Beam, actually recorded the song first. And I knew that song like growing up in the 90s. And
wow.
Prithvi has redone that song. So I think there's also this response to an intergenerational thing. You have to remember there's a whole new generation of younger Indo Caribbean men and women who don't know these older songs. Like they may know the names of the artists, but they never grew up with these songs. And now the fact that you have the younger artists taking these older songs and revamping them, I think that creates new meaning. And there's this whole educational thing going on, right? We're learning about our past, we're learning about our history through that kind of contemporary revamping. The lyrics are very like indentured. They're very tied to the past. Sham Sundar Gagari Utawe Hamar Gale Monge Kemala. The beautiful dark earthen pot that I lift, and on my neck I wear a ruby chain. And this translation is thanks to Dr. Visham Bimal, who runs the Caribbean Hindustani Facebook page. He is fluent in Bhojpuri. He's done a lot of translations of Chutney songs. They are on the Caribbean Hindustani Facebook page if you want to check that out. And the verses, Balama utawe mehela do mehela, Dera utawe spala. My beloved builds 2 palaces, and my small brother-in-law constructs a temple. So they're very much meanings that don't have actual meaning like in our contemporary like lives. These are things tied to identity. But those resonances of that indentured history become really important for us. I think it's not so much about knowing what the lyrics mean, it's the sound of the lyrics that has a lot of meaning for us because they're Bhojpuri, because they sound Indian, because they capture that kind of Indianness. That's why we're so attracted to them. So I'm going to play that for you, and then I'm just going to talk about like the future and some of the things going on in Chutney. I think we could end there, Talisha.
Yeah. And then we'll open it up for questions. If people have any questions, we'll probably take a couple questions.
Cool. So you're going to hear Premati's version, which is Prithvi's grandmother, and then you're going to hear Prithvi's version, right? Right, so you get it. So she's just covering the song that her grandmother sung, but a whole like contemporary vibe that's added to it. It's more of like a soca aesthetic. It's more of like the contemporary chutney thing going on in. There's not so much like the dolak and the danza, which is more like the chatak matak. I think there's just an updating of the sound, and I think that updating is really important and has meaning and creates meaning. The younger Indo Caribbean generation who might be very far removed from some of these older songs and these older names. In terms of the future of Chutney Soca, I mean, I've been asking, and if you know, Ravi B has had 2 big songs, Chutney Soca songs in the last year, Start Over. So bring the Johnny Walker, Start Over. And then he did Take a Headshot and Pass It When You're Done. Songs about rum, songs about heartbreak that have always been there in terms of, you know, the Indo-Caribbean tradition. Of that, hold on, like, we gone again.
It's the last one. I think it's the last time we're gonna go through. So let's see if it catches itself back. Let me see. No? Okay, so that's perfect. It's and then we'll get you to conclude. Darrel, you send me your request like you usually do. That seems to work best. But I'm glad that people are feeling inspired to record some tracks now. That's amazing. You know, I always told myself I was going to be a chutney singer. I just don't have the voice for it. But you never know what life holds for you. And shout outs to Brown Girl Diaries. I see you guys are here. They're another organization doing really cool work around Indo Caribbean identities. We do need some chutney karaoke. Amazing.
I like that. An interview that Ravi B gave recently, it's on YouTube and it's on, I believe the account is The Business of Carnival. And it's talking about some of the more corporate and entrepreneurial aspects, marketing aspects in terms of the music of the Trinidad Carnival tradition. And the host sat down with Ravi B to actually talk about like pirating and piracy and this idea of the use of the Bollywood film melody in chutney music. And he actually said that for 2020, he was proposing doing an Indian pop thing that he wanted to call iPop. And songs like Start Over and Headshot are that type of sound that he wants to cultivate. So my question is, can we still call that chutney or chutney soca music? Is that still chutney soca music? Because there is no dolak, there's no dantal, there's no harmonium in that music. It's very much more of like a groovy soca kind of aesthetic. The way Ravi B sings, however, is very like Indian. His stylings are very Indian. The melodies he uses are Bollywood film melodies, so that's, you know, a connection to that Indian heritage. Can we still call those things chutney, or is that something else? And then what does it mean to have something called like Indian pop? And are we saying that chutney is something that has to only be sung by Indo-Caribbean artists? Because in the chutney soca monarch tradition, we've had artists who are not of Indian descent who have sung chutney songs and sung chutney soca music. And the only other thing maybe I want to conclude with is that there has been more cultural exchange between Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname, and I'm happy to see that taking place. I think we need much more of those collaborations. Guyana has its own chutney monarch competition. There's some great artists coming out of Guyana, like not only Terry Gadra, there's a whole like younger generation of artists. I believe Bunty Singh is the current Guyana chutney monarch. And then we have people from Suriname and Trinidadian and Guyanese artists re-recording some of like the old Suriname chutneys, like what Ramdeo Chaitu and Bijwanti Chaitu used to sing. We have that re-recording going on. So what do those things mean? No, like definite answer. I don't know where it is gonna go, but I think moving forward, we really need to think more in terms of like cultural mixing and cultural change, and think about what possibilities exist because of these cultural mixings, right? And I think I will end there, Talisha.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Darrel. I think that you gave us a really incredible conversation about the merging. I love the idea of the remixing of different cultures to create this type of music. If anybody has any questions, feel free to kind of drop them in there. We'll probably stay on for a couple minutes. But I love the way you kind of framed that conversation, and even the importance of Chutney Soca Monarch and that coming to be at the same time as really important things in history. I learned a lot. I always learn from you. I say it all the time. Every time Darrel speaks, I learn. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for kind of staying with us through all of our technical difficulties, the fire alarm, all the things that have happened. We really appreciated having you. So I think we have one question around Chutney in the carnival season. Do you think it's represented enough throughout the time? Darrel, I don't know if you want to. Oh God, we can't hear you. A lot of really cool questions around cultural mixing, and I'm glad that people really took time to learn a lot. While Darrel sent me the request to kind of join back, I just wanted to say that these conversations, we're going to continue having them. So if you guys are free on Thursday, we are going to have Ryan, otherwise known as Tico Wine. He's going to be talking about some really important conversations about Indo Caribbean identities and queer identities and how those have kind of come to be in Toronto. But Darrel, I don't know if you really want to take the question on Chutney and carnival season and if there's enough representation before we go. Somebody just kind of asked around Chutney and carnival season.
That's a good question. No, I don't think there's enough representation of chutney or chutney soca in the carnival tradition. A chutney soca has never won road march, and not that that has to mean anything. There are complications, and there's a whole other politics behind like the road march, which people who are familiar with carnival will know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, I don't see Indo Caribbean culture being represented in that kind of mainstream carnival space in the same way. Songs that cross over, songs that normally are not sung in Bhojpuri, the ones that are sung in like English Creole crossover, the one jumps on the track to create a remix. You all remember I and Marshall, like that song went big, and I think that song went big because of Marshall jumping on the track. We could say the same thing though about recently Gunga Gana, a huge chutney anthem, and it was also played instances that were not traditionally chutney or chutney soca. But I also think that had to do with the visibility of Ravi B. A lot of people know Ravi B's music. So yeah, I don't think
Yeah, Darrel, I think you answered that question really well in terms of visibility at Carnival. There isn't a lot, especially when it is being spoken in the Bhojpuri language, which, when we talk about Chutney music, traditional Chutney music, that's what it is. We have another question, Darrel. I think we'll probably take this one around from KSR Media around why do you think, oh, it disappeared from me. Why do you think
one more thing, even like for those who know like the carnival calendar and the schedule, like the week before carnival you have some of the final major competitions. So Thursday night this year was Calypso Monarch, the Friday night is Monarch, Saturday is the Panorama, which is for the fans. And Chutney Soca doesn't take place in that final week. Chutney Soca is about a couple weeks before that. And it doesn't even take place in Port of Spain in the Savannah where most of the competitions take place. It happens in South. Traditionally, it has been Skinner Park in San Fernando. It was moved to Guaracara Park because Skinner Park was under construction this year. But that's also tied to the idea of like cultural geography. The Indian heartland is considered like South Trinidad. So a lot of the chutney events still continue to happen in Southern Trinidad. So there's this also, this whole division in terms of geography when it comes to the culture.
Amazing. All right, I think we'll take the last question. Why do you think there's a divide when it comes to music and parties? Why do we never hear Kuli music at a Soca fete, but you always hear Soca at a Kuli party? That's an interesting one.
Sorry, okay, what was the first part of the question?
Why is there a divide when it comes to music? Yeah, why is there a divide when it comes to music?
I think that's like so a lot of things. That's not just one, there's not one reason for that. I think, and I can really talk about it in terms of like the Trinidad context, but I think some of the things would resonate in terms of these contexts. If we think about like the independence period and the way that politics in Trinidad and Guyana became very racialized and continued to be very racially motivated, then the culture has become racialized, the music has become racialized. And in Trinidad, you know, Calypso and Carnival and Steel Pan continue to be symbols of like the nation. We're gone again, Talisha.
All right, let's do this one more time. Yes, that's so interesting to place that in the context of, you know, all of those different histories. And I know I was speaking about it a little bit earlier, but then also that idea of what is cool to play at a party. I know I went to the AGO maybe 2 years ago and begged them to play Lote Lal. I think it was like a soca party at the AGO and begged them to play Lote Lal. And when they played all of the you could see like just like being able to hear Chutney music play in that space. Darrel, sorry, I'll send it back over to you as you were talking about you know, the political.
Right. No, I think, you know, the Indian sounds have particulars, and that's something that's not well understood with other communities. And I think the fact that, you know, we hold on to a lot of these indentured sounds and these indentured legacies, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But I just think there's a disconnect because Bhojpuri is not a fluent language. Nobody speaks Bhojpuri fluently, right? There's a disconnect in some of the traditions. There's a disconnect in terms of knowing some of these sounds and growing up with those sounds. I mean, I wish they would play more Chutney and Chutney Soca in Soca spaces. But, you know, I think just the way that, at least in Trinidad, how the nation and how national culture was envisioned and how it was shaped, how it was constructed, was very much along like Afro-Caribbean lines as opposed to the Indo Caribbean ones.
We heard you up until Afro-Caribbean. We'll let you finish up your thoughts on that. I'm seeing a lot of comments about people connecting. That's great that people are connecting. I'm great that these conversations are happening. It is true that people are very unaware of Indo-Caribbean in the Caribbean as well as in South Asia, in the continent. So it's definitely an ongoing thing. I would love to learn more about Bhojpuri as well. I think the Caribbean Hindustan page is a really good resource for that. I've been following them for a while. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say on that point, Darrel.
Oh no, I just think it's complicated as to why there's divide and why we don't hear that music as often. And I've asked that question all the time. You will see so many flyers advertised for like soca fets, and all you see is like soca and like dancehall. Like you don't see Chutney on those things. And if you want to go to hear Chutney, you have to go to a Chutney fet, or you have to go to a Chutney space. Like you have to go Calypso Hut in Mississauga, or you have to go like Twilight in Scarborough. You know what I mean? And I don't know how we get over that divide, how we get over that disconnect. Perhaps more awareness, perhaps things like these, which, you know, Talisha and Lotus have graciously organized, initiatives like these help to educate and create more awareness. Perhaps that will, you know, make people want to listen to Chutney more and hear Chutney Soca in those spaces. Because to me, Chutney Soca is a Caribbean sound, and it's just shaking up the existing sound palette that we have there.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's a perfect way to kind of end up these conversations. I love that you guys have kind of enjoyed this and you guys have stuck around with us. We really appreciate this. And, you know, this is that yeah, thank you, Darrel, for sharing all of your knowledge. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. And to everybody who joined, we really appreciate you guys joining. As I said, on Thursday, we're going to do something similar. And then on Tuesday, we're going to have Premika, who's going to be talking about traditional Indo-Caribbean dances. I learned from her that there is a specific way to dance Tassa that's been kind of lost or diluted through history. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that. Darrel, thank you so much. I love you. I love the knowledge you bring to these tables. And again, thank you everybody for joining. I'm hearing so much conversation about, you know, wanting to have more conversations like these. Definitely something we're going to think about. We'll even create a poll so you guys can give us some topics that you guys want to talk to learn about our heritage a little bit. So thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it. Feel free to reach out to me on the Lotus page or on my direct Instagram profile, Talisha R. and we can continue these conversations. I'm just gonna let Darrel say his last words. Ooh, wow, thank you. I'll let Darrel say his last words. And again, thank you guys. I really appreciated having you guys all in this conversation. Darrel, before we end off, anything you want to kind of finish off with?
No, but just maybe leaving her thinking about Chutney Soca and the music, and in terms of like Indo Caribbean identity and however it is you identify, understand that they, gave you some information, some insight that you before. Like that's always my thing. Knowledge transfer is so important. Not and wind up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye, Darrel.